Wasim, come here.
Hi there, my name is Wasim, and some of you might know me as Pixel Buddha. In today's lesson, I want to teach you how to create Mickey hands inside Zbrush. You know, the 50s, 60s style hands, you know, the white gloves. And for today's lesson, I'm going to be using a technique taught by a guy named Preston Blair. And I really recommend checking out his book. It doesn't matter if you're a 2D artist, doesn't matter if you're a 3D artist, this book is just good. It's so good. It teaches you a lot of things about exaggeration and shapes and character and flow and all that. It's a really good book. And we'll be using his technique in breaking up the shapes, the main shapes, and then taking and adding detail inside Zbrush. Now, for this tutorial, you don't have to use Zbrush. You can use Blender. You can even use the iPad sculpting, the Nomad Sculpt. Because I've been showing you just the technique on how we create the gloves inside Zbrush. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into Zbrush. All right, so now that we're in Zbrush, you'll notice that we have this screen which is called a light box, and here you have different type of meshes for your different projects that you're trying to work on. So what I usually choose is I choose this dynamesh sphere because I love the gray color, and also it's a good point to start. And I'm not going to be using this anyhow. I'm going to be replacing it with a lower polygon sphere. And what I mean by that, if we go down and we select draw polyframe, you'll notice that this mesh is really dense. And by dense, I mean it has a lot of polygons. And you can actually see the count on top. It's 43,000 points. Well, when I'm trying to create simple, shapes like the hand that we're going to recreate, I try to keep my meshes as low as possible, especially when I'm blocking. And by blocking, I mean creating the main shapes that we're gonna build our model on top. Okay, so to do that, I'm gonna go into B, and you'll find something called IMM primitive. And if you click on this, you should notice a couple of basic shapes, spheres, cylinders, squares on top. Now, the one that I usually use is this one called polysphere. So if we click this one, you can actually add it to your model in a couple of ways. You can drag it on top of your model, and it's just going to create it there. And you'll notice it added two of them because symmetry is on. And to turn off symmetry, you can go to transpose, activate symmetry, or what I highly recommend is getting into the habit of using shortcuts. Now, if you press X on your keyboard, you'll add only one. What I like to do is I want Zbrush to take this sphere and replace it with the model that I have in the workspace. To do that, just go into Geometry, Modify Topology, and just select Mesh from Brush. So what it's going to do is going to replace the old one with this. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is just undo for a second. So Control Z, and I'm going to go on the subtool, duplicate, and I'm going to hide the first one, and then go back to Geometry, Modify Topology, okay, Mesh from Brush. I did that just so I can show you the difference between the two. So what I'm going to do now, I selected the top one and drag it to the side. The first thing you're going to notice is that I rarely go into tools and menus. I'm really used to using Zbrush shortcuts, and I highly recommend you getting into the habit of doing that. It might be a bit difficult at start, but trust me, it will make your experience and your how you handle sculpts and your tools way easier, and just Zbrush will feel more seamless for you. So you'll notice if I click W, E, R, these on top will change. Now you can go in and select this when you do, but if you select W, it's just gonna bring out the gizmo, and you can start moving stuff around. Now the other thing that I can do is to select between the two subtools. We have two subtools here. You can either go on the subtool and click that one, or you can hold Alt and click on the other one. And this is just saves you that traveling to, and because sometimes you'll have subtool closed and you have to drag it down, go subtool, select it. Rather than doing all that, you can just go Alt and clicking on the model. Now I saved these two so I can show you the difference and why do I use this instead of the simple one instead of the high density one. Now you'll notice this one has 98 active points. This has 43,000. So dealing with 98 polygons or active points is way easier and more manageable for me than having to deal with this. And by that I mean if you go B, M, V, and that gives me the move tool, which you're going to see here, the move brush, I can go ahead and I can scale it, and you can do that by pressing space and selecting the draw size, or you have the draw size on top, right? Now, if I want to go ahead and edit this, I can just go in and just start dragging stuff around, and you'll notice how simple and really fast it moves, and it holds the shape. Okay. Now, if I want to do the same thing to this one, and I'll start dragging, although it seems smooth now, and you'd say like, yeah, but this one looks way better. Here's the thing. This is lumpy. Now, if I go here and under geometry, dynamic subdivision, and click dynamic, which what it does is just subdivides this and makes it smoother, you'll notice that the difference between these two. This one, if I select and I go dynamic, nothing changes because the density is so high, it's not going to affect it. But this one, even with dynamic on, if I go in and hold shift and smooth it, see how easy I can work with that and how I can get different shapes really fast instead of this one, which I really need to go into and start moving, you know, stuff to get a clean surface. So this is the reason that I use low spheres. In a high density polysphere, we can go ahead and jump into our project. Now, for this project, I chose a page from the cartoon animation book by Preston Blair. And I really recommend you checking out this book because it has really nice exercises about how you can go from simple shapes like a cylinder, a sphere, and a fan to create really nice, expressive and exaggerated shapes. I love how his style is really flowy and it has a nice, it has a nice feel to it. Okay, so for this one, we're going to start with the sphere, which we already created, and then I'm going to go ahead and switch to the side. You'll notice that I'm rotating the sphere, and you can actually snap to any direction. Now it's hard because this shape is a sphere, but if you look at the head here, you'll notice that I can go from each side, and by holding shift, I can actually snap to that. All right. Now, when I'm working, I usually turn off perspective because I'm a toy designer and usually my projects start from a 2D drawing. I try to keep the volume of that toy as much as possible. And then from that, I can switch to perspective and make sure everything works and looks good in 3D. Now, I'm going to go to the side because the head is telling me that that's the size. And then I go W, which is going to give me the gizmo. Now, if this happens and you have the gizmo in a different way, in a different position, just go ahead and hold Alt, click this arrow, and then this pin, like a Google map thing, and then let's scale it down. By holding this, I can go ahead and scale it more like a fat pancake. All right, so now that we have that one, I can go ahead and do, in the subtool, go duplicate, and I'm just going to move that up. Okay, so now we have two shapes. Now, let's start and working on this. I go B, M, V, and it's going to give me the move tool. And then what I'm trying to recreate now is this shape. Let's call it the fan. So if you want to work in perspective, in symmetry, you have to turn that on. You're going to transform and go activate symmetry, and you can have symmetry in X, in Y, and Z, or you can press X on your keyboard, and then go X, and then I'll start moving this just to get the shape that I'm going for. And once I have the main shape that I need, I'm going to go ahead and turn off symmetry because I need this area to be a bit larger. Okay. Now let's move to the other part, which is the cylinder, the socket that's gonna connect to the palm. And we can do that by going to append, and I'm just gonna add a cylinder from here. I'm just gonna scale it down and move it down, and then just make it a bit taller. Doesn't matter how long, because we can go back and edit it after. Okay. Now for the next one, we're gonna go ahead and create the thumb. Now for the thumb, I'm gonna go ahead and create it from 2 pieces, and I'll show you why in a second. So as I told you before, it's easier to switch between, and I like turning on polyframe, just it makes it easier for you to visualize which piece I have selected. So if you hold Alt and click on it, you can actually switch between these tools without going into the subtool and having to select each one. So what I want to select is I want to select this one. I want to make sure I don't have symmetry on. I'm going to go back to B, select IMM primitive, and I'm going to go back to my polysphere again. Now going to the side, just go ahead and drag one of those spheres in. Now what I'm trying to recreate here, you'll notice I added it on the center. Why is that? Because if you look at this sphere, you'll notice that if we go ahead and split this into 4 quarters, you'll notice that as soon as the sphere gets to, or the circle gets to that midpoint, and the curve starts going out. So I'm trying to recreate that curve using the same technique here. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, this thing here is called a see-through, and I use it with all of my projects, and it's easy for me to put the reference image or the sketch that I have underneath the brush, just open it in a window, and then I can just go really fast and check. Although I have another monitor in front of me and I'm looking at the reference all the time, I love having that one underneath because it's really easy to see and also check sometimes to see if your proportions are correct. So now we can go ahead and start moving that shape around to get the look that we're going for. I'm not worried a bit about this being too perfect. This is an organical part, so I don't want it to be too sharp or too, I don't know, too mechanical. Okay, so once we have this shape, we can go ahead and create the thumb area. So I created these from 2 parts because if I go ahead and do B and select IMM primitive polysphere, and just on top of that, we can just drag it in, because I wanted to have that nice arch. If we look at the drawing, you have this nice arch here, and I wanted to keep that just by scything this and just moving it in and just doing that. I don't have to worry about getting a nice clean round shape. I can just go in and just, sorry, BMV, and just make this flat, and then just bring the sides in, and then just move it in and tweak it until you are happy with the shape. You can also scale it up if you think it's too small. And I'm happy with that shape because we can always go back and tweak it. So the next thing what I want to do is I want to go ahead and split these, because if we look now, if I go ahead and solo this, which means I'm just looking at this one and not the other subtools, I can go ahead, what I want to do is I want to make sure this part is separate. So you can do that by selecting Control Shift and clicking on the palm. What it's going to do is going to hide the other parts. And under Subtool, you go Split, and you go Split Hidden. And you'll notice it added a new subtool, which is our thumb. So now if I go ahead and remove Solo, you'll see if we go hold Alt, click, you have, multiple parts to work with. One thing to keep in mind while working in 3D or sculpting is to always rotate your model, from different angles and different views, just to make sure the volumes and proportions are looking good. Because sometimes it might look good from one side, and when you start rotating it, you'll notice that the volume is off, or anything is not looking as supposed to be. Now, what I noticed is I want the thumb to have a slight rotation to the inside, and then I want it to rotate on this axis just a bit, just to give it a more natural look. Again, don't worry, I'm not worried about these not being perfect yet, because we're still going to edit and tweak them. Now, if you go back to our drawing, you'll notice that we created our main shapes, and now it's time to start adding the fingers. This is the method that I usually use. It doesn't mean that this is the only method that you can create shapes, or it's the only method that you can actually sculpt. If you want to sculpt this from one piece, you can go ahead and do that. If you want to create it using cylinders or pills or squares even, you can do that. It's just I'm just trying to show you a method which usually works for me when I sculpt characters or toys, or even when I do hard surface modeling. This is the method that I used on a daily basis on the projects for my clients. Now, I'm going to show you two different ways in creating the fingers. I'm going to go ahead and select the palm, and under IMM primitives, I want to select polysphere, and I want to turn on transparency, just so I can see inside. And I'm going to go ahead and drag a sphere, and then I'm going to go ahead and scale it up and just move it slightly in. As I told you from the start, we're using what I love about this method of creating this extra shape, which we're not going to use anyhow. We're just going to use it as a guide. It tells us how tall each finger is going to be and where they're supposed to be sitting, just to get that nice nice look for it. Okay, so in this method, I'm showing you that you can start from a sphere, and once you're happy with that one, you can click W, Alt and Control, and drag. You can actually duplicate it without creating a new subtool. You're just creating a new shape in the same tool. And then we can go ahead and scale this one and move it here. And then again, W, Control Alt, and just drag it. And maybe scale this down a bit. And again. All right, so now if you go ahead and hide the fan, you'll notice that now we have our three fingers, and then we can start go in and tweak the palm to get the look. Now, again, I want these to be separate, so I can go ahead and click on the palm and just go split hidden, and it's going to create the three fingers. Now, the other method that I like using is we can go back to the palm and go make sure you have this one so we know, and go curve tube. So B, curve tube. And now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and just drag a cylinder. Now what I love about why I love using this is I can actually go back and move this curve, and I can also make it thinner or thicker. So let's say I want this to be thinner, just hold shift, draw size smaller, click, and now the finger's thinner. I want it thicker, just hold space, size it, and just click, and now I have my my finger. All right. Now the other thing that's really good is I can actually pose this, so I can actually have different poses. If maybe I want this to be sculpted in a certain pose and not straight. And the final thing is the fact that it has so many faces, it just makes it easier for me to edit. And I'll show you what I mean about that in a second. Now for this second one, I'm not going to go duplicate this. I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. and another one here. Now I'm creating it because, again, because this is an organic piece, I don't want it to feel perfect. I want the difference in, while moving your pen on the screen, and how each piece is not exactly as the other one. Okay, now just click. I'm gonna go ahead and hide the fan, and again I want these to be separate, so I'm gonna go Shift Control, click on the palm, and go Split Hidden. So now we have two types of fingers. Now I'm gonna go B and select Move. And notice if you click B here, it's the quick peek, which means this is the tools that you've been using in this project. It just makes it a bit easier than going to BMV, or if you go B, you just can select it on top. All right, so I'm just going to keep this as a guide. I'm going to start moving this. Now you notice when I start moving that, it's also affecting the other one, and I don't want that. So to get rid of that, what you can do is you can click W, hold Control, and click on one shape. And what it does, if you go solo, it actually masked everything else, and now only this one is affected. So this way I can tweak this without affecting the other ones. Now I can go Control, click outside the model, and it's going to flip the mask. And I can go ahead and edit this and get the look that I'm going for. Okay, now I want these to be thinner here. So to do that, I'm just going to hold Shift and just drag a bit. I don't mind affecting the other ones because the other ones are going to have the same effect anyhow. Let's hide this, and I'm going to go back to the other fingers, and I'm just going to move them to the side. And you'll notice. Now, what I don't like between these two is the fact that I have all these faces. It just gives me the option to edit these easier than the other ones. Now, these work fine, and you can actually go ahead and divide them. You can go Control D, and it will add more divisions to them. So it's going to make them, smoother. But again, there isn't a right or a wrong way to do it. These are two different ways of doing the same thing. It's just this way gives me more control when I create it, rather than this one. I need to do a lot of tweaks to get there. Okay, so now let's get back to these fingers. Now, if I go ahead and go under Geometry and do Dynamic Subdivision, and I click Dynamic, just to see how these gonna look when we add more subdivisions and smooth them out. The first thing you're gonna notice is, because these are cylindrical, if I turn this off, you just have a flat top. So with Dynamic on, and select and make sure you have Move, I'm just gonna start moving these just slightly out. You noticed in the other ones we didn't have that problem. I'm gonna show you in a second. Notice that these, because they were made from a sphere, they have that nice surface. So with each thing, you're gonna have something that's a bit, different or off. And again, this is why I'm telling you there isn't one exact way to do it. You can just try different workflows and see which one fits your style, fits your workflow. And don't let anybody tell you that your workflow is wrong. All right, so maybe make these a bit thinner. Just holding Shift and then dragging. Just what it does is just smoothes it out. Okay. I want to give it a hint of a, like the inside of the palm, the fingers. All right, now that we have these ready, we can go ahead and start, tweaking the palm so we can get those nice curves. So I have the palm selected. I'm just going to turn polyframe on just to make it easier for you to see on which piece that I'm working. And it's just about, just dragging pieces around, and you'll notice I'm still working with the low density. I'm not worried about adding or making this smooth. What I'm worried now is I want the main shapes to be blocked in. That's my main thing that I'm worried about now. Once I have that, the rest is just adding detail, and just cleaning. What I'm doing here, and you'll notice in a second, if I go to subtool and I'll do geometry, dynamic subdivision, I'm trying to add a bit of a definition of like this is inside of the palm. And maybe make this a bit straighter. Maybe this one we can, and maybe add a bit of a bulge inside. Now you'll see, even if I try to add more in the middle, like maybe I want these to have like a three bulge look, just like hands usually have. I can't do that because it's low density, and now I'm at a point where like, okay, this is how much I can push this shape without adding too much subdivision. So what I want to do now is I want to turn dynamic off, and I'm going to go divide, and I'm going to do on top, I'm going to do delete lower. So what it added more subdivisions for me to work with. So now I can go ahead and add a bit of bulges here, just to add a bit of more definition. And I want this between the fingers to have like a U shape. You've noticed here you have like a nice U shape between all the fingers. Okay, that's what I'm going for. So now if I go dynamic, you'll notice if I turn this off, notice that we have these nice definitions. Maybe have this a bit bigger, maybe straighter. Now, looking at this, I might need the fingers just a bit thicker. And this is just this will come with experience. You start noticing something like all the style that we're going for. Well, I want I just feel these are a bit thinner. Now we can do this different ways. You can go B, and we can do inflate, and you can drag on top of it, and it works. But what if you want this to be scaled up, like all the shapes? If you go scale, it's not going to work because it's going to scale all of them. But if you go to underneath deformation, you'll have something called inflate, and we just need it just something around there. It should be fine. And that just adds a bit of a, inflate feel to each one. Sorry, I still have the inflate selected. I'm just gonna go back, make and maybe move the fingers just a bit. Now, if you want this to be centered, just don't forget hold Alt, click the circle, and then click the pin one. And that's the basic shape of our hand. Let's add a bit of dynamic to this one, and we'll go over it again to make sure. Maybe a bit, maybe move this inside a bit and have that on the outside, just to have a nice U shape here. Maybe a bit. All right. Now what I want to do is I want to add this socket here, or donut. And you can add that either with a sphere. So maybe if I go ahead and append a sphere, and you can, scale it down and then move it like that. It might work, but I know these are usually in even cartoons. I don't know. They look like a donut, like the socket goes in. And to do that, I'm going to select a donut. I'm going to go ring 3D. So select that, move it down a bit, scale it down as much, move it in, and then go back to deformation, and we just inflate it. And I think something like that is good. So I'm just going to scale it down a bit and just give it a slight bend. Move this a bit out. Now if I take this and scale it just a bit down, you'll see how nice that shape looks. All right? And you can play around with this until you find something that works for you. All right. So the next step is to merge all these pieces and create one hand, so we can start, doing the final adjustments. All right. Now looking at this, I think I need to make the thumb just a bit bigger. Now, what I love about the new ZBrush is this silhouette, which, like, immediately you can see if something is off. Like, you can notice that this here, the shape is not that clean. So I can go in and I can tweak this part. Already you see, you can visualize. In fact, it's small. It only shows you the silhouette of an object, and you know where you need to make just slight edits so it works a bit better. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and merge this. So how do we do that? Well, again, we can do this multiple ways. What I want to do now is I'm going to go ahead and just delete the old fingers that we had. So I'm going to just delete them just so we can keep our subtools nice and clean. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, and I'm going to name this hand. And I'm going to put all these parts inside. I don't need the fan, so we can keep it or we can just, delete it. And I don't need the donut or the cylinder, so I can hide these for now. Okay, I just want to focus on the hand. All right. Now, before I go ahead and merge this, what I want is I want just to have a bit of a curvature to the out, just to feel like if you open up your hand, you'll see like your fingers just curve out a bit. So to do that, I'm just going to take BMV and just move them slightly, just slightly up. Just adds a bit of more tension to the fingers. No worry, we're going to clean these. They're not going to look like sausages. Okay. A bit thinner. Okay, so now if I go in, and just smooth these out with shift just slightly. Okay, now we can go ahead and merge these into one shape. I think we can do inflate a bit here. Just smooth it out and do a bit of an inflate. And just move that a bit out. Okay. Now we can go in. And now, for my first method, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select the folder. And under this gear icon, I can go in, click that, and do Boolean with subdivision. What it's going to do is going to create a Boolean shape with all of those parts. And by Boolean, what I mean is it's going to try to stitch them together. You can see how. So this is, if I try to go Control Shift to isolate one of the pieces, it just gets rid of anything that's connected to another piece. And now it just adds like an extra polygon to stitch. And if I go ahead and try to smooth these, you see the result is not super clean because these are still a bit separate until we dynamesh them. And by dynamesh them, you'll see what I mean. It will just add, but before I do dynamesh, I'm gonna keep these as sharp, so I'm not gonna smooth them out. So you can go ahead and smooth these just to get a nice U shape. Okay, now under geometry, I can go to Dynamesh, and I'm not going to change anything, so I'm just going to do Dynamesh. And what it does, if you look at it now, you see everything now is way smoother. And if I go ahead and smooth it with Shift, it just looks really nice. And see how all the polygons flow nicely, and it gives me a nice look to it. I know you might say, well, it still has like a, you know, I can still see the polygons. It doesn't look really smooth. Well, there are multiple ways to fix that. I think you gotten used by the fact that there isn't one way to do one thing. And you can either go in manually, as I'm doing now, and just, you know, cleaning it with Shift and just smoothing it out. Or you can go to deformation and you can do, where is it? You can do smooth and just smooth that out. You can do polish by feature, and it's going to do as it says. It polishes the, see? And it also, what I love about polish by feature, it also keeps the sharp edges sharp. And I'm just going to go in slightly and just smooth them out. Okay, so that's one way to do our hand. So we can go in and do a bit of a smooth again. Just do smooth, or you can do a bit of polish. And now if we go ahead and unhide, this is one arm. Okay. Now, the other method to do this is we go back to the folder. Okay, I'm going to hide these, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do Boolean with subdivision. But instead of Dynamesh, what I'm going to do now is Zbrush. Now, again, as you saw before, it's just stitching, just stitched. So what I want to do is I want to go into Zbrush, and I'm going to leave everything default, and I'm just going to click Zbrush. What it's going to do is going to create a nice, clean topology. And by topology, I mean everything flows really nice. And then I can go in with Shift, and I can clean those shapes in. Now, you'll notice if you do that, how, because this is, again, this is really low in polygons. This is 5,600 polygons. You can break the shape. Now, before you do that, how about before we do the Zbrush, we can go in and do what we did before, and, you know, maybe clean this topology a bit, just smooth it. Sorry, the surface, smooth the surface a bit. Okay, and then once we have a bit of a, we can go in and Zbrush, and it might be a bit cleaner. Now you can go in and we can start, you know, smoothing pieces. Now, although this is low, what is good about this, because it's 5,000, I can go into dynamic subdivision and I can hit dynamic, and I can smooth the subdivs. Maybe if I go to 5, it will look really nice and sharp and has a nice clean feel to it. Just gonna lower it to 4, and you can go back and tweak it The beauty about this technique is you can always turn dynamic subdivision, and you can have the control of a lower, mesh, which, as I told you from the start of the video, is it gives you that much control on the model. So both ways, this is one way. So if I go ahead and do Shift S, it's going to save a screenshot of it. So I can select the other one and I can put them one next to each other. And you can notice that both of them look really nice. Let me just smooth this. So go geometry dynamic. So again, I'm going to do Shift S. So this one here is the one with lower polygon counts, about 5,000, and this is the one that we have, and it looks smoother, but it has 67,000, and so a lot of more dense polygons, and I can't make the same tweaks that I can make to this one. But if you look at them, they almost look the same, and this one works perfectly if you're doing animation and you want a more clean topology for your model, and it's easier to pose. And I'm not going to go into pose right now, but it's easier to tweak. It's easier, as I showed you, from difference between the sphere, the dense sphere, and the lower one. So now I'm going to go back to the dense one. If we look at it, you can see it here. And we're just going to do the final tweaks for this. So I'm going to go ahead and remove solo, have this, and for this one I'm going to add a bit of dynamic to it. Geometry, dynamic subdivision, and we can raise it to 3 maybe. And for this one you can do a bit of dynamic subdivision as well, or you can maybe try spaghetti arms, and let's do that. So go B and go curve tube, and what I want to do, I'm just going to have transparency on. So let me select this. We do maybe that shape, maybe something like that. And don't forget that we can always tweak. You'll notice that this is soft and smooth just because we have dynamic. I created it on the same subtool. So if I turn dynamic off, you'll still see that it's nice and low. And I really love using this tool. It just gives me that nice flow to it. And I can tweak. And don't forget, I can make it thicker, I can make it thinner. So maybe I want to go like really thin arms, or really thick arms. So I think something like that. Now we can click, and then I can move this down instead of that one. Maybe hide that one. Remove transparency. And what I want this to be separate, so I'll select this and go split hidden. So now we have it as a separate piece. Just center it here. And maybe we want to have like a nice, I want it thick here and maybe thinner here. Just hold shift and just go over, smoothing that part. And you can always go back and tweak it if you want. And once you're happy with it, just go to geometry and dynamic. And now we have a spaghetti arm as well. That's the beautiful thing about having it in low subdiv, in low polygon count. You can do a lot of tweaks really easy, and you can do it on the whole mesh without, worrying about. All right, and now for our final thing, I'm going to go ahead and add a bit of a, the iconic 3 droplets. So I'm going to select the hand, and I'm going to go B curve tubes, and I'm just going to drag one here. But I would like these to have, that pill look. And you can do this if you go shift. You can do that, and then you can maybe that, maybe you can, I don't know, scale it. Or and I think you know what I'm about to say, you can do it in a different way. So I'm going to go and undo these. I'm going to go back to B and select curve tube. And then top, you go to stroke, click on that. Curve modifiers, and then make sure you have size selected. Here's what happens. If we go and drag, it will do this, okay? Now you'll notice this goes inside the geometry, and I don't want that. I want it to sit on top. So to do that, just go on the picker, depth, and just do Ctrl-Z. And then if you drag one, it's just going to do it on top, just only half of it going in. All right, so drag that. And I don't like the shape of this. I want it more like a droplet and not this thin. So how do you do that? Just select this point and just drag it up. Maybe just drag this down. And then if I do that now, I'm going to have that look. Maybe it needs to be a bit thinner. Maybe a bit thinner here. So if I click on it, maybe a bit thicker on top. Maybe more. Okay. So again, I'm not going to duplicate it. I'm just going to create 3 ones like that. And again, I'm going to select these. And under subtool, I'm just going to go split, split hidden, and then I can go in and I can tweak these. Click, isolate one of them, maybe rotate a bit more, isolate this one, maybe this one needs to be a bit shorter, and maybe I'll smooth this out as well. Just to give it that more of a droplet kind of look. All right, so now geometry and dynamic subdivision. All right, and before we wrap this up, I'm just going to go ahead and add a bit of color. Okay, and to do that, I'm going to select this. Make sure you have mRGB selected, and in the material, I'm just going to go select something else. Any of the skin shade 4 works perfect. Go color, fill object, and then that's about it. The other one needs to be black, so I'm going to select this one, and I'm just going to make it a dark gray. Yeah, go color, fill object, select the spaghetti arm, color, fill object, and I'm going to do the droplets as well. Color, fill object. Oh, the donut needs to be white, sorry. Color, fill object. Okay, so now I can go ahead and do what I showed you before to the side, and just do Shift S. This is a nice way to, you know, preview your model, maybe send it to your client, see it so they can see it from all sides. I really hope you found this tutorial helpful, and if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And if you like this tutorial, maybe we'll do another one where with different poses for the hand. If you check out the book by Preston Blair, you'll notice that he has a lot of shapes, and it's a really great exercise to you know, create a lot of emotions and poses just using a simple hand, and you can get a lot of emotion just from hand movements, and you can see that in his drawings. All right, see you in the next one.